Hello, welcome to the latest episode of United in Focus. I'm here joined by Sean, Fatsal, and Johnny to preview Manchester United's next league game against Burnley. We go into this game looking for our first win in the league. So there's a lot to discuss, and we're also going to look at which player would you bring in before the end of the transfer window. Welcome, everyone, to the panel. Johnny, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, we mentioned I have not got the start of the season they wanted, just 1 point from the first two league games. Will that pick up against Burnley, and how are you feeling? Are you optimistic going into that game?
Well, I think you would certainly hope that it would pick up. Um, they're a team that probably accept they're going to be in a relegation scrap. And I think we've been quite good this season. I think the second half against Fulham has maybe tainted people's views on how we were doing on the whole menu stuff as well. But like if you look at how we've been playing this season, we've like more expected goals than Liverpool, second highest shots in the league. So I think we're doing okay. It's coming together, but so we need to see points now.
Listening to Johnny there, he's clearly stating that there's no crisis. We're not at that stage just yet. Sean, this game against Burnley, it's another team that United should be beaten. Of course, people are asking if we don't do that, will we then be speaking about a bit of a crisis?
I think we will. Obviously, 1 point from two games is not what we were all dreaming of after such a successful pre-season. And actually, the fact that the Burnley game is on paper should be the easiest game of the season is scary in itself because there's so much pressure on that. There's already questions being asked of Ruben Amorim and some of his decisions made this season, and I think that will ramp up massively if we don't do anything but a convincing win against Burnley.
That's one of the biggest talking points since the beginning of the season is the goalkeeping situation. Benadir has been starting in goal. Onana has been kind of left out. Do you think that's adding to the pressure that's on the team right now because it's raising more questions? And what would your approach be going into this Burnley game? Bring Onana back in or stick with how he's been going at the moment?
Yeah, I definitely bring Onana back in. I think that has to be a no-brainer choice because as much as Onana hasn't convinced, Bayern has managed to look even worse. And anytime you can quash a talking point around Manchester United, you have to do it because there are just so many. So the goalkeeping situation is adding to the unnecessary uncertainty around the club. So the quicker established number one goes between the sticks, the better it is for the defenders as well as the whole team. I mean, it's one less question for Ruben Amorim to answer, and we can expect that there will be a lot of those. So he can help himself by taking at least one good decision.
One of the biggest talking points going into the game, Johnny, of course, is the midfield. A lot of people are disappointed with how United are performing in that department, not just this season, but in previous campaigns too. Kobbie Mainoo has been overlooked. Feels like Amorim is willing to play anyone in midfield ahead of him. Does he need to start getting games, start stamping his mark on this team, and would he be in the team against Burnley?
I think Burnley would probably be the perfect opponent to bring him into that pivot alongside Fernandes because we're going to have a lot of the ball. And with Casemiro and Fernandes there, we're just hoofing it up. So that every time they get the ball, they're looking to hoof it as far as they can hoof it, really. But Mainoo will get on the ball, dictate play, and should lead to us dominating the game a bit more, you would like to hope.
Our opponents this weekend, Burnley, are up against it this season. You could say they're going to go into most games as underdogs. And the man in the picture there is Scott Parker, who has a little bit of Premier League experience in the dugout. Sean, when it comes to Scott Parker and Amorim, should we be worried that we're going to be tactically outclassed this weekend? Because looking at his results at previous clubs, at Club Brugge, he didn't last long there before being ran out the door.
I think if we're getting tactically outclassed by Burnley and Scott Parker, we're in big trouble. I think that's the first thing. It is a very different Burnley side to the one we faced previously. I think they are going to try and play a bit more than previous Burnley sides have when they come to Old Trafford, but I think that could also suit us. I think there should be spaces, and we have created chances in the last two games, and that's so important to remember. We just haven't seen the goals, and that's the big difference that needs to happen. There will be huge questions of Amorim if he does get outclassed by Scott Parker, and if we don't put on a convincing performance. So yeah, the pressure is really on.
One of the players that Burnley can boast about this weekend, I suppose, is Armando Broja, as a player that United were linked with in previous summers. Johnny Vatzel, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on him. Are you happy that United didn't go in the market for a striker like that, and we're now talking about Sesko instead?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't scored a goal for what, like 2 years? So I'm not really bothered from that perspective, but it would be typical Manchester United if he hasn't scored a goal for a long time and then comes to Old Trafford and then hits a worldie. So we have to be aware of that as well. But yeah, overall, Benjamin Sesko over Armando Broja is not really a difficult choice to make, even though we are not really used to playing well with strikers and Sesko is having to feel the same pain that Højlund did once. So hopefully that gets sorted out as well.
On that note, tactically, Johnny, United did start the first 2 games of the Premier League season without a striker. Will that change against Burnley as we move on to more a tactical look on the game?
I think it has to. I think we've been missing that focal point up front. I think without it, we'll just continue to see the same problems of not being able to create much, other than maybe Matheus Cunha pulling out some magic from his back pocket. So yeah, I think Sesko has to start 100%.
Mentioning Sesko, another striker that was overlooked and he did miss a pre-season is Joshua Zirkzee. Sean, do you think that we could start seeing him being implemented? Because before he did get that injury last season, he was contributing nicely in Amorim's side. I think a lot of people forget that.
Yeah, there's been so much talk about Mainoo not playing in the first 2 games that we've forgotten players like Joshua Zirkzee haven't even featured yet. It's important. I mean, Sesko can't be our only choice this season. Zirkzee's going to have to play minutes. He has shown promise, especially in games where he needs to link up with players around him. That could happen against Burnley. I don't think he'll start. Could we see him from the bench potentially in the second half? That would be exciting, I think, for everyone.
I know I asked you already, Vatsal, about Broga playing against him at the weekend. One question I have to ask, though, is how do we stop service to players like this? Because with the way the midfield has been playing in the first few weeks, we're being easily ran. But what can we do to prevent players like that getting service against us? Because we're always going to be up against it if we're giving away chances.
Yeah, I think we have to work with the assumption that Amorim is not going to change the system. So we'll always have that 3 versus 2 numerical superiority for the opposition in midfield. So if there is numerical superiority, you can only tackle that to a certain extent by working extra hard. And I know that's a very Roy Keane answer, like passion is not running enough, but that has to be the answer when you don't have the players. And that's why I think, like, as good as Casemiro is trying to do, I don't think he's the answer. So the only way you can tackle that is by just having the ball enough. And for that, you need a circulator next to Bruno Fernandes, because he's never going to keep the ball. He's always going to look for those Hollywood passes to create chances. And that's fine, but you don't need a destroyer next to him against Fulham or against Burnley. So get Mainoo in there next to Fernandes, aim for 60-65% possession, and hope that Burnley don't score from the 1 or 2 chances they get, because there's no answer to the midfield dilemma in this current system.
I love that answer, Vatsal. I hope Amorim's listening. Moving on, we do have the big debate for this episode. So the transfer window is going to close on Monday. We've only days left. We have a number of players that could be leaving the club and players that we'd like to push out of the club. But firstly, Johnny, which player would you bring in to United if you had one choice, and why?
I think we would all be in agreement that a midfielder has to come in. And I think Baleba, as much as we'd all would like to pick him, I think the chances of signing him look slim. So I've gone for Alan Wharton. As he could be that kind of Michael Carrick figure next to Bruno Fernandes, who's going to try the Hollywood passes, as Vatsal said. But I think he'll bring control, he'll bring creativity to the midfield. And also, he's a lot more athletic than Casemiro would be. And he's stronger and he's more of a presence than Ugarte would be in midfield as well. We probably would have to pay close to the Baleba fee to get him, because they've just sold Eze, but that's United's fault. They've had all summer to target him. So they're going to have to pay the premium now if they want them.
Sean, who's your pick? Which player would you bring in this summer for deadline day?
Yeah, I'm also looking at a midfielder, and I think the answer is Lucien Agume. Obviously, as Johnny said, we all want Baleba. That looks increasingly unlikely to happen, but the next best thing is Agume, in my opinion. The profile's perfect for Amorim. He wants an athletic midfielder. He's over 6 feet. He covers ground brilliantly. He ranks in the top 3% of midfielders across Europe for interceptions. We need a long-term replacement for Casemiro, and Agume seems to be the perfect fit. We're talking about a fee of potentially around £35 million, which is much lower than the Baleba or Wharton fees. It's realistic. We can do it within the next week. We desperately need a midfielder. So yeah, Agume is the answer for me.
That's all. Who are you picking?
Yeah, I mean, midfield is the obvious answer, but sometimes the most obvious answer is also the correct one. But as long as we're not getting Baleba or Wharton or Agume, I think the guy who's already halfway through the Manchester United door is the answer, which is Sen Lamens. Because as I said in my earlier answer, that the goalkeeping position needs clarity. And I'm not going to say that a 23-year-old coming from the Belgian league is going to be the immediate Manchester United number one, but at least it pushes Onana to be better. And hopefully urges Amorim to never play Bayindir again. So that would be a positive addition by subtraction. But yeah, as long as we get at least a goalkeeper or a midfielder, it's not a perfect window, but it is as good as it could have been considering our financial situation. So yeah, Sen Lamens would be my pick. And I think he's the most realistic one as well.
I'm gonna go for probably one of the most unrealistic ones. Then it's Baliba. I'm gonna stick with, and the reason for that is previous managers, when they've tried to address the midfield issue at United, have had targets and haven't got their targets, and then they've settled for second best. And it's such an important position, the midfield, and it's such a weak one at United right now that we need to get it right. And maybe that means putting the money where the mouth is.
And it's not even that unrealistic, Baleba, because we can easily sell like Garnacho, Højlund, Sancho. They have to leave. So if they leave, we might see a Hail Mary bid from United. Who knows?
We'll all have smiles on our face next week when we're recording if he's a Manchester United player. Moving back to the game against Burnley, I want to quickly get your predictions for that game. Scoreline, or not scoreline predictions, but your predicted 11s. So, Johnny, I will come with you first. Who are you going with in goal, and for the rest of the team?
I think in goal it has to be Onana, unless Lamens is through the door by then. And then I think the back three probably stays the same as it has been. I think they've been very solid. I think Luke Shaw looks like a different player compared to what we've seen last season, although he's probably hitting the point now where he would get injured. So hopefully he can continue beyond this game. I'd go maybe Ahmad, because I don't like the idea of playing Dalot against a team like Burnley, where we should have a lot of sort of time in their half. Then I want Mainu next to Bruno and Dorgu on the left, and then Cunha and Buemo and Benjamin Sesko up top.
I like the sound of Mainu back in there. You didn't go with Harry Maguire, sticking with the lit. That's Sean, are you on the same page, or would you make any changes to that?
I actually think De Ligt's made himself one of the first names on the team sheet in the first two games. I think he's been incredible. I think going into the season, that was one of the big debates. Is it going to be Maguire or De Ligt in that central role? It is being harsh on Maguire because he's also been very impressive there. But I think De Ligt's proved himself to be undroppable in the last two games. I definitely want to see him start against Burnley.
It's a good headache for Amorim to have. Where do you sit on that debate, Batsa? Because at the end of last season, Maguire was one of the leaders in the team. Rarely puts a foot wrong. Good professional. You can hardly fault him, especially after years of so much criticism. But De Ligt also is playing really well. So who would you be starting against Burnley at the weekend?
Yeah, I think De Ligt has to start, because we have to start looking from a long-term perspective as well. Like Maguire is 32 or 33 now, and his contract expires next season. Like he can sign an extension for reduced wages, but you have to phase him out, or at least make him a squad player. Like Matthias De Ligt has to be the future, and alongside Lenny Yoro, Aiden Heaven, the players like that, they need a cornerstone between them, not somebody whose contract expires next season. So I think Maguire has been a model professional, but his best days have to be behind him. So you have to move forward, and sometimes that's just the kind of ruthless decision making that is needed. Not sidelining Mainu, but choosing De Ligt over Maguire.
Very good. Well, that's your preview. United versus Burnley. And I really hope we're coming back to you next week and we're talking about having secured 3 points, because like we did say, it's been a slow start to the season. We don't want to be talking early about crises and whatnot. Do let us know in the comment section if you agree with our calls for that last signing before the transfer deadline, or if you don't agree, let us know who you would sign. Please subscribe also. We'll have more content coming very soon.